When working with data actions in Genesis Cloud, it can sometimes be difficult to determine exactly what happened with a request or response in a flow, or sometimes when an API interface has been defined but not yet delivered. There's a neat tool we can make use of at webhook.site, and they provide a free tier that allows you to send data to a unique URL and potentially receive a response back as well. This free tier is limited to 100 requests in history and expires in 7 days, but can be really helpful for testing and troubleshooting. They also provide paid tiers that have a lot more functionality. So here's what that looks like. In Genesis Cloud, I can add an instance of the Web Services Data Actions integration. Once I add that integration instance, I'll just give it a unique name, call it something like debug. And it's really important when you add a new integration like this to remember to activate it. Otherwise, attempting to send an action with it will fail because the integration isn't active. Once the integration has been created and is active, we can create a new data action using our integration, and I'm just going to call this debug as well. And this data action then can be configured to send a request, and it could be any type of request, to this unique URL provided by webhook.site. I could specify a literal request body, or I could just use the default contracts that are provided in Genesis Cloud. So in this case, I'm going to use a default contract, and I'm going to put in some fields here. We'll just call this value 1 as a string, value 2 is going to be an integer, value 3 will be a Boolean, and in my response object, I'm going to expect a string called response that will have some value in it. So now on Webhook, I can also define the response by hitting the edit button for my URL. And I can define some things. So I can define, by default, it'll be a text response, but I could change that to application/JSON as the response content type. And I could put in some response content that I want sent back. So now I can test this. And if I put in a value and some integer, and whether it's true or false for my Boolean, and run that action, then I will get a response, and I will immediately see the details for the request that were sent, including the body and any headers that are provided. So this provides a really neat way to either mock up an API endpoint or to debug data for an existing endpoint and see both the request and simulated response objects.